Hi, I'm Gia Elliott. I directed the Popcorn Frights 2021 film, Take Back the Night. You've just watched Stress Signals. I am here with the filmmakers because they have worn so many hats on this film, pulled off such incredible work. I will let them introduce themselves. Christine, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Christine Nyland. I was in the movie. I also co-wrote, co-directed, was in charge of all of the fun VFX or SFX bruise makeup that was on my body during the whole film. And probably a lot of other things.
And producer.
And producer.
Yeah. I'm Terence Krey, also a co-writer and co-director. And I played the old creepo at the end that showed up. You thought it was a one-person film, didn't you? But it's not. And yeah, producer and, probably other things.
Yeah.
As indie film often is.
Yeah.
When I first watched this film, your message really snuck up on me and kind of like sucker punched me in the best way. I thought it was really emotional. I thought you stuck the landing, 10 out of 10. Maybe one of my favorite films about depression. I would love to hear you guys talk a little bit about the theme of the film and how you decided on the rendering and exactly what it was that you wanted to say.
I mean, we were writing this like during the summer of 2020. And so I think, the notion of like depression and isolation was just really, really palpable and sort of in the air for everybody the whole time we were working on the project. I know we had originally talked about like taking a break from filmmaking and not trying to like hammer out a script. And really, really quickly, we were both so stir crazy that we just started getting on the phone every day writing it. And I think that's a part of how it crept its way in. I also know, I don't want to like speak for you, Terence, but I know I've definitely struggled with depression and anxiety for years. So yeah, when we were putting a character in the woods with this like attempt, like this struggle to survive, I think it was really natural as someone who has spent years ideating to be like, well, I think about dying a lot. So with this, how would this feel if that was true for you? What would the stakes around surviving be like? And then that sort of led to, well, what if she just actually is suicidal? And that's how we get there.
And kind of to your point, Gia, yeah, one of the things I'm super proud of is that it is small at first. It really kind of creeps up. I think that, we gave a link to a friend once, and I, like a test link, and I remember him saying like, yeah, it wasn't until, when she's kind of night swimming, that in the middle of the film, I start to like, something else is going on with this person. And I'm very happy that the way it kind of doesn't feel super loud at first, but then feels so, it feels so obvious, right? It's such an obvious, like kind of looking back at the film after it's kind of been revealed. And the other thing I want to say about that is also like, yeah, I think another thing I'm very happy with is like, as much as it was the, this kind of like summer 2020, we felt like, eventually we got to a place in which we needed to make something. I think Christine and I are also filmmakers that we don't just stop at like, well, we can make this, and Distress Signals feels like such an economical, and for a lot of ways it was, it's just like, we can really pull off A, B, and C. But I'm very happy that we landed on something that had a little bit more kind of emotional heft that made us really want to go in the woods for 2 weeks.
Yeah, so for those of you who do not know, this is their second feature. Their first feature, An Unquiet Grave, sort of highlights themes of grief. And then you also have a web series which has two or more seasons. Great.
It's three. Yeah.
3 seasons. Yeah. So, obviously there's the sort of very well delivered monologue, so it doesn't feel like a monologue towards the end of the film, where, you're talking about how the line between life and death, people often refer to it as like a black line, but you see it as being like more of a softer space in between those things. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, how you came at that for this film and how that either aligns with or differs from your previous work?
You know, this is a great question because Terrence, I was thinking about the other day, I was thinking about the fact that like this movie is the movie that it's like the most explicit in, but consistently Terrence and I make work about people who want to be dead. Right? It's really true. Both the three you just mentioned and a few others that we sort of have working on there is a lot of this like sleepwalking through life, like not fully alive, not fully realized in their lives characters, whether they've lost a loved one as an unquiet grave and sort of wish they had gone with them and are trying to like bring that person back. Or, you know, Graves also deals with like a past trauma that has sort of left the protagonist dealing with depression in a much more like horror comedy way. But yeah, I think this was just probably the most direct exploration of depression specifically. And really, like, I, as an actor, sort of personalized what Carolyn's experience was that had sort of led her there, but we really intentionally wanted to keep those specifics out of the script so that you just sort of got this picture of the state that she was in as you figured out what that state was.
That's interesting. No,
you pretty much stole my next question from me, because I was going to comment on just how lovely of a choice it was to not say she's depressed because. I feel like that is a narrative trap I watch people fall into that isn't necessarily reflective of the experience of being depressed. It just happened to you. I thought that you captured it so beautifully. But Terrence, I also didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no, I think it's just another thing that's interesting about this film, and it's so, I haven't thought about Graves in, I don't know, couple weeks or something, but it's so interesting bringing that up, because this film feels so raw for a number of reasons, but kind of bringing it up with the past work is, the Graves and An Unquiet Grave, which are not related. They just have the word grave in the title, but they're supernatural. There's such a heavy kind of metaphoric element that's really helping, kind of tell that story, and this one doesn't, right? Like this one's like straight and very straightforward, and there's kind of no heightened mythology to it, and it's just interesting to think about it. Yeah, the word raw, like it's more like at the forefront in a way that's like kind of you're not digging through heightened metaphor, supernatural. But yeah, no, there's certainly a theme.
When you set out to write this film, can you talk a little bit about your writing process? Obviously, everyone's going to want to know how you guys co-write, what your method is there, but something that I'm also really curious about is how your ending came to be. To me, choosing to have her prove to herself that she does want to be alive is such a wonderful choice. It's a really good rendering. I'd love to know where in your writing process you kind of discovered your ending.
I think pretty early on, because I remember there was a day that we came up with this like post credits, like her walking in to this like diner space. And I think that was the day that we were like, okay, we have an ending. We can there's a movie here.
Yeah.
And so that appeared, and like the relief of that moment, the like return to society and being like, yeah, I get to do this. I don't want to not do this anymore. And that was pretty early in the process, because I feel like that was a North Star for a while as we were figuring out how we got there.
Yeah, and overall, I also think that like we're generally hopeful people, so I feel like most of these films, start from a place like, oh, well, they're gonna live, they're gonna get through the thing, even like our first, Unquiet seems like a very heavy and dour film, but I do think it kind of ends hopefully, and this one also just felt, that she was gonna make it through in more ways than one, and then that kind of ending of just really, because that was the thing. It's like once she defeats me, I remember it being like, well, it's I don't I know she's going to get out of there, you know, but I also need to like live there's something to the catharsis of like living through seeing it. And I think that's why the kind of idea of melding it with post credits and having it be like a score moment and or melding it with the credits and having it be a score moment. It's like, yeah, we get to like have some catharsis, even though we kind of know what's coming, you know?
And what was the writing process like working together?
I mean, Terrence and I lost my job at the beginning of the pandemic. So Terrence and I spent almost every day just on the phone. The writing process for this one was it was a little tricky because we didn't really know where we were filming. And so in the past, we've had like a much more conventional sort of brainstorm together, do a pass, and then, you know, like usually like Terrence will do like a sort of first crack and then I'll come through and fine tune some dialogue things. But usually anything gets put down on the page. But this one was tricky even structurally because we didn't really know where we were filming. And our friend John, who was one of the 4 people who was on set for this movie, was a lifesaver and had friends in Massachusetts who had acreage and ran around like taking pictures of things. And then the day before we shot, we walked through and we were like, okay, I think this scene can happen here. Maybe this scene can happen here. But so it had to be really nimble with regards to that. So we sort of figured out the story beats and figured out the scenes. And we tried to be really on top of ourselves and not have like Carolyn walks through the woods as a scene, right? Like everything has a beginning, a middle, and the end. A walkie-talkie goes off. We're looking for food. Something's in the forest and scares us. But it also had to be very responsive to the location once we got there.
Yeah, but fortunately we were able, there was to Christine's point, there was very little what's in the film. In fact, I would say like 98% of what's in the film was scripted. There was very little like, oh, we'll figure out something to do here with this. We lucked out that we were able to know the types of locations enough that we could craft like scenes, you know, even if the scene was just she's looking, you know, she's eating a leaf, you know, she's looking for, you know, finding water. Like, so I think that's another strength of the film, is that we were able to, as quickly as we had to put it together, and as quickly like we were kind of like, okay, John, is there a place that has water? Okay, yes, all right. But we at least had time to like script scenes with like beginning, middles, and ends.
Yeah, I will say, as also like a woman watching it, when, you know, when she first wakes up, I'm like, oh man, if she gets her period, it's gonna be like the worst thing that could happen. And then she gets her period, I'm like, yes. Like, I don't know why, like the beats that you guys chose were the ones that I would think would be the most terrifying if I was in the position. And, you know, like Terrence, once your character makes an appearance, it's like a creepy guy alone in the woods with a gun. Like, yeah. Worst case scenario, he's alone. So like, did you guys have like a little bucket list of things that you thought would be the scariest, or things that you thought would be the most unsettling, or did you kind of find them as you went? Or can you talk a little bit about like your discovery process for the tension that you built into the film?
Well, I mean, I think, and some of this comes a little bit back to shooting during the pandemic, right? We knew it was going to be really small. So we knew it was mostly going to be just me, and we knew we didn't want to do a screen movie. So that put Woman in the Woods, right, was our sort of jumping off point. And really quickly, I think we sort of fell into conversations like, I've seen this movie with men a lot of times. How is it different when it's a woman? And I think the like biggest first difference was like, well, is being found a good thing, right? You're vulnerable. Yeah. So who finds you suddenly? Not the end of the movie anymore. And that, I mean, the period stuff is just, I think like you've already like hit the nail on the head of it. Just that's the sort of thing that often gets like ignored in films like this. And so having sort of the most feminine version of like, yeah, things that really happen with our bodies, had to make its way in. But really we hooked into this question of like, yeah, if you're a woman lost in the woods, do you really want to be found? Is that actually helpful?
And also it took so, you know, for when my character comes in, I think that there was, again, just so many places where, you know, right? You have to do so little to make that unsettling and bad and uncomfortable and creepy. I think there were so many questions, at first starting out writing this film. I mean, there was a supernatural version of this film, but there was also like, is this guy like most dangerous game? Like, I want to hunt a human, and we just like kept like, oh no, what's like just like the most real, the most, how can we just be so like simple and subtle, and and this guy is such a kind of a mess and such a kind of like angry and like just, and clearly there's been a whole movie happening on his end of him watching her for the first 50,
Yeah.
Yeah, and just we only and the fact that the only heightened thing is this like moment of anger where he fires and accidentally hits her. I feel like, and even that feels again like it was just the most grounded, and I feel like everything came alive after that with the interaction with the two of them.
It was almost like the less we tried to make him scary, the scarier he became, because it feels so like something that could happen.
Yeah, it really reminded me of the movie The Strangers, where like those two guys ring the doorbell and they're like, can we have some sugar? And they like talk their way in. And the like female protagonist lead is just like doing the polite things. And but there's never enough of a red flag where she should be behaving differently. So if she would be the crazy one. And that, I felt like you guys were so patient with the way that you paced out his red flags.
Yeah.
Up till the moment when he says, fuck that guy about his dad, when you're like, no, like, this is not right. And, and then he talks about like, oh, I really like tracking. So like, this is just like a hats off to you guys. The slow cooking that you did to get us to the moment where she decides to run demonstrates her bravery so beautifully. I felt like that really sort of sold the whole, point that you were making in the film. It was just like really wonderfully done. I'm wondering too, like, you're both acting, you're both directing. I'd love to know about your co-acting, co-directing process, all the way from, how you prep for that, how you rehearse, how you shoot, all the way through to when you're editing, what your relationship's like.
I mean, for part of the film, fortunately, like the first half of the film, I'm acting and Terence is directing. It wasn't really until we got into that, like a little bit less than the back half, that we sort of had to break those things down. But even in other projects where the roles are a little bit more delineated, we're always very deeply in conversations about things pretty holistically from writing on. So, the amount of direction that either one of us needed by the time we got to those scenes, like we had both crafted those characters together. So we both had a really deep understanding of who they were. We had both made the discovery together that we didn't want this guy to be like a big, scary monster. We instead wanted him to sort of feel as like real and grounded as he could. I don't know if Terence, if there's anything you want to.
I think, I just want to deconstruct the role of the director constantly, always. But, I think that, because I think, Christina's relationship, obviously we're starting from writing. And I think when you're writing together and you're both like filmmakers, and you're also going to be either co-directors or other films where I'm just directing, Christine's acting, like every step of writing, we're still having, and also especially in like low budget, world where it's like, well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to pull? How do you see that being? We're already talking about the filmmaking element of it so inherently, like at the writing process, and then like in pre-production, also we're like co-producing. So we're like, and also like, the kind of the money's flowing through us, the money decisions are also, together. So like, as much as like, yes, like, a demarcation does happen, for just sanity's sake on set of me directing and Christine acting normally, it still doesn't, it's still more of just, again, for sanity's sake. It really is something that we kind of craft together. And there's equal kind of equal parties involved really every step of the way. And then for shooting this, a lot of once we were both in the scenes together, it was a lot of trust in Dan, our DP, to kind of just know how, and he's someone that he shot our first film, he shot Graves. So, it's a relationship I had for a long time, and just kind of trusted him to like know, there was some planning, there was storyboards and all that stuff that we talked with him about. But you're in the woods at 3 a.m. and you got the fire going. And so it was a little bit also like, we got to roll with it, and kind of really everyone was involved in certain elements as far as how to shoot it, especially some of those me and her heavy, scenes and stuff like that. And,
yeah, when you have a 4-person team making a movie,
Yeah.
everyone is doing everything on some level.
Yeah.
It's really amazing what you guys have accomplished. Is really amazing. The movie's really beautiful. I think that we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to ask you a couple like rapid fire questions.
Ooh.
What kind of camera did you shoot this on?
We shot this on a Blackmagic Pocket 4K.
It's a good camera. Looks beautiful.
It's cheap.
Where did you shoot it? You said Massachusetts, but where?
Why am I drawing a blank? It was in
West Brookfield,
Brookfield,
and
Massachusetts.
adjacent.
Yeah.
Where?
How long did it take you to shoot the film?
It was 12 days. I think 12 days top to bottom. I think we had maybe one day of like pickup, like we just shot woods. 12, 13.
How did you settle on the tone of your score?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I feel like Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, but the score who was done by Sean Hettinger, great guy. He's like a predominantly electronic musician. And I think, if I recall, there was like a desire to like, we're in this natural element. What's a nice juxtaposition with like kind of electronic, and I feel like when I was cutting it, I was cutting it to a lot of like ambient, Juliana Barwick, for instance, music. I think that was the impulse. I don't know if I'm, okay, cool.
And then at some point, Sean sent us like a temp track, and we were like, ooh, yeah, more of that.
Yeah.
So she's in one costume the entire time. How'd you settle on the purple shirt?
I had a tank top that was that color that I really wanted to be in the film, but I didn't have duplicates of. And then I bought 4 of an identical colored shirt when I saw them in a store, because I had already decided that was the color. It looks good with the green.
It really does, and it stands out. And I loved how it matches.
Also, I feel like I need to shout out Christine. Christine did all the costumes, obviously, for herself. But if you watch this film, there's some real, like, serious, like, great costume tracking of like the dirt and the knees getting ripped. That's all like Christine being like, very intense.
The bruise too is wildly
And the
consistent.
bruise,
How did you learn how to do that, and how did you track it throughout the film?
Well, there was a pandemic and I lost my job, so I had a lot of time. So I just did a bunch of practice runs before we went up to shoot, and then I did it every morning. And fortunately we were able to shoot relatively chronologically. So I forget now if I had 4 or 5 stages of it where it sort of was like initial and then got deeper purple and then started to yellow. And yeah, we just did that every morning. I will never want to have to do that again though.
You did great work. I have 2 more questions. Please don't cut me off. Okay, my second to last question is, how long was your first cut?
Ooh, great question. I want to say it wasn't crazy. I think it's 80 now. I think it was probably like, it was under 90, maybe 87, 88.
It's great.
We don't shoot a lot, so.
Yeah. Okay, and then my last question is, anybody watching this who's potentially thinking about making their own movie, what advice would you give to them?
The story is free. You have all the time in the world to write yourself a good screenplay, and write yourself something that fits your resources.
I like that. I'll say that. Yeah.
Double down. I love it.
Yeah.
You guys made a lovely movie. I'm so happy that I was asked to have a conversation with you. I've been looking forward to this since I got the email. For everyone else who just watched, this will continue to be available until the end of Popcorn Frights, which I believe is the 21st. So if you like it, please tweet, shout it out on Facebook, tell all your friends and family, send them a link, write them a review on Letterboxd. It really does help. So thank you guys very much. And thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
Gia. And thank you, Popcorn
Thank you,
Frights.
everyone.